All right, so I never thought I would be doing this, but I'm doing a review of the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. Not the sort of original release version, but the new version with OneUI on it, Android Pie. Um, so I'll tell you a brief history of my sort of Samsung experience. I had the original Galaxy Note. I hated it. I've had a few iterations of the Galaxy Note. I hated them. I had the S, whatever it was, S1 or S, whatever it was. I don't know. A few other Galaxy phones back in the day with TouchWiz, and I absolutely hated them. Then I decided I took a break from Samsung for quite some time, and I got the Galaxy Note 8 last year, I believe it was, and I sort of liked it. I mean, Samsung experience had certainly improved um, on you know, all the things I hated about TouchWiz, which were basically the looks and the battery life. Um, and now, you know, the Note 8 was kind of hit or miss, but the Note 9. You know, I had gotten it when it was originally released. I sort of felt the same about it. I thought it was a perfectly fine phone, but the battery life was still a little short for me, and I thought that there were other phones with, you know, equal or better features out there. The camera, you know, things like that. You know, I tend to sway towards Huawei phones a lot, even though they're in a lot of trouble these days. But so I had sort of gotten rid of my original Galaxy Note 9. And now that they have released Android Pie for it, and more so released the Pie update for it with One UI, I thought I would give it another try. So big changes with this update, honestly. You know, as you can tell, I was pretty biased against Samsung phones for quite some time. And now I might have a pretty hard time telling you that there's any better Android phone out there after this latest update. First off, the always on display has gone from being a little bit gaudy, a little bit too much, to being nice and subtle and adult. You know, it's got sort of a nice small area up there with, you know, time, date, battery percentage, which it had before, but it's much sort of more understated now. And obviously you can choose different clocks, but I don't think that this one was available. And for some odd reason with this one, I find myself staring at the phone a lot less, checking and checking and checking. It's very obvious to me that, you know, this section is the static data, and then when a nice new icon comes in that's colored, which is also gorgeous. I mean, it did that before, but for some odd reason with this latest always on display, I find this a much better way to notify me that there's something new to look at. So that's a really nice step, you know, in the right direction. I would probably argue that there's no better always on display available anymore. The only thing that I wish that you could do would be to, I think you can double tap this and then it scans your face and then it'll open up the actual notification. But I always go back to, my face is sort of blocked by the camera right now, so it's not able to scan me, but usually it does work. And then it'll open up the notification. I always go back to Moto display, which I think is the most useful sort of ambient display ever created. And I wish that Samsung would sort of let you just sort of see it from here without having to unlock the device. You know, obviously that would be a configurable option, and maybe reply to whatever the notification is, but you can't do that. It's fine. You know, it's not the end of the world, but that would be sort of the ultimate in always on displays for me. So I'm going to go ahead and open this guy up. So as you can probably see right out of the gate, I installed Nova Launcher. The stock launcher is fine, but I always end up installing Nova Launcher. I mean, you know, I try and do the stock launcher for quite some time, but then I always just end up finding the gestures in Nova Launcher, etc. They're just more useful, and I like the configurability of Nova Launcher. So take that for what it's worth. Doesn't change the phone a whole lot. But one big thing that I still sort of hated about this phone was the screens, or whatever screen zoom they call it on this. It's the DPI. In my opinion, it was still way too big. So I actually go into developer options, and I generally configure that at about 500. You know, I've got the minimum width rather setting. I've got 20/20 vision. You know, I like more screen real estate. And so that sort of does that for me. I really wish that some phone makers would make the sort of the small zoom, if you call, you know, whatever you want to call it, really small. For some odd reason, these phone makers avoid doing that. But the only one that I've ever found was the right size for me right out of the box was the Razr phone and the Razr phone 2, which is a big reason I love those phones. So I figured, you know, there's plenty of Galaxy Note 9 reviews out there about, you know, how the camera is and so on and so on, and unboxing and whatever. And I'm not a photographer, and there's plenty of unboxing videos out there. So the camera's good. There are better cameras out there. I think the Pixel and the Huawei phones, the Mate phones, and the P20 have better night photos for sure. But it does okay. I mean, it'll definitely get you by as your sort of main phone with the camera. It does have a nice feature with the ability to just quickly zoom in and out. And I think that it is an actual optical zoom. It certainly looks like it when you take pictures. So that's a very nice thing. It doesn't have like a real night mode. Supposedly it just changes the aperture to 1.5. There's no real evidence of that I can tell. And like I said, there are phones out there that take better night pictures, which for me is a big deal because I end up taking a lot of pictures at bars and so on and so forth. So, but it's fine. It gets me by. So what I really want to go into is what I like about OneUI. So there's some things that are just a little bit silly about OneUI. So Samsung's general idea is to have all the sort of buttons and touching and etc. down here instead of up here where it's difficult to reach. Really, all that does in the settings app is just have a nice big blank space up here, and a few other apps it sort of does the same thing. I don't use their messaging app, so the messaging app is nice. You know, it makes sure that you know, the things that you would actually press are down here, but I mean, so do most other messaging apps. You know, I haven't been blown away with this whole sort of idea that they have about moving everything down here, but that's not what I particularly care about anyway. What I more so care about is the new features that they've given to this phone. So let's see, I'm just going to go through sort of everything. I mean, these Samsung phones have an LED indicator, if that's your thing, which is obviously very nice to have. The stock launcher has app icon badges, which is also very nice. You can configure those, show with number, show without number, yada, yada, yada. So connections, let's go under here. Not much, you know, out of the norm in here. I put on airplane mode when I do these reviews. But, you know, typical sort of Android stuff here. Let's see if there's anything cool here. So there's some of this stuff here, which I can get into in a little bit. You can actually, you know, it's got mirror link and HDMI. You can configure the HDMI mode. Do you want it to use DeX or mirroring? And I can kind of get into that stuff later. But one thing that I really love about this phone is that I can use the HP Elite X3 Laptdock, which I got on eBay for like 130 bucks, as my Samsung, as basically a laptop with Samsung DeX. And, you know, there's loads of Google videos out there that you can do. I just made sure to get myself a nice $25 Thunderbolt cable, and that works like a charm. Audio, mouse, etc., etc. It's really, really nice. And Samsung DeX, I've used both Huawei's and Samsung DeX, and I like Samsung DeX better. So right now, that's kind of the leader in sort of desktop experience for phones. So very nice. I didn't notice a particular change with the Pi or OneUI update. You know, it was nice before, and it's still nice now. So not much else to say about that. So it's got a blue light filter. It's got night mode for darker theme to keep your eyes, you know. So I like that. In fact, I had played with that before, but I might even just leave that on. I just like a dark mode, and obviously, as Google has somehow only recently figured out, that tends to save quite a bit of battery as well, which is nice. So screen mode, you can, the Samsung displays have amazing colors. There's no real argument to make about that. It's got all sorts of modes. I just configure it to adaptive display. The one thing I don't like about Samsung displays is they're curved. I don't know what the point of that is. It's stupid. I wish they would stop doing that and just give me a little bit more width. I also particularly hate it because you can't tell, but I bought this phone, let's see, 3 days ago? No, 5 days ago, and dropped it on its face with a case on it 3 days ago, and it shattered. So this is a new display. And it shattered because these stupid curved displays cannot be protected from the sides, as you can see, because case makers do not create a lip that goes past that curved display, because sometimes there is content that actually needs to be touched on the curved display. So that's a huge mistake in my opinion. That's one thing I really hate about these Samsung phones, but I'm getting past it. Well, I'm not getting over it, but I'm dealing with it. So, font size and style, you can configure that. I leave that at the more or less stock setting after increasing my small width setting. You can configure your screen res. I keep it right in the middle. Supposedly it's a happy balance between battery life and resolution. 720 is certainly too small for me. 1440 would be nice. But I can't really see, obviously you're not going to be able to see that on my YouTube video here, but I don't see any sort of jagged edges or anything like that with the 1080 setting. If you could see jagged edges on a 1080 screen that's this small, you've got incredible vision. So full screen apps, obviously, so that now this is a different sort of aspect ratio phone. So a lot of apps will ask you if you want to expand this into full screen. I always do that, and I've rarely run into problems with that. So wallpapers and themes, this is, the Samsung stuff. I don't get into theming too much. I just think it's another layer of sort of nonsense that can slow down your phone. So this is where they've sort of added some more useful stuff. So screen lock type, I really like that you can do intelligent scan, which supposedly scans both your iris and your face at the first time. I have a feeling it sort of just uses whatever one it matches first. But it's nice. It's pretty quick. I think that Huawei's is still faster, but it's pretty quick. For those times that you, for whatever odd reason, don't feel like touching the fingerprint sensor in the back. I always just sort of default to that anyway. But I will say there is one thing that I love about the way this phone acts from the lock screen. And that is, I guess I can just sort of go into it with the settings, but on a lot of phones, they by default will do lift to wake, and just, if they see your face, even though you didn't really want to unlock the phone, it'll unlock the phone. So there's a lot of configurability with that. So sometimes you either get lift to wake or you don't. It's not really an option. But this, now that they've added, well, you know what? Let me let's see here. So it's actually not under here, but so I'll get into that in a little bit. But so smart lock. I'm not gonna. Everybody knows what that is. You got a Bluetooth thing around. It can automatically unlock when you have that nearby. So always on display. Like I said, they made it a little bit nicer with this. I really wish that I could do home button and notifications instead of requiring the clock to be up to get the notifications. Sometimes I would rather the screen just be totally blank until a notification came in. But this clock is so subtle that I don't find myself just constantly looking at it as a sort of distraction. I do just, I'm able to sort of filter it out and only notice the notifications, which is nice. You can configure it when it's shown. So now you can even, with OneUI, this is new, at least I believe. I never saw it before. It's got a tap to show option, which is effectively an ambient display. Which is really nice for those who are distracted by a clock constantly showing on your phone. So I had actually been using that for a while, but I did find that the new clock was so nice that, or so sort of understated that it didn't distract me. One good thing about this tap to show option is that it will probably save a decent amount of battery on the phone. I would say, I wouldn't say 1% an hour or something like that, but overnight it'll probably save you 2-3% on your battery, which can add up. And then obviously you can say show is scheduled or, whatever you feel like. So the tap to show option is very nice with OneUI. So let's see here, show music information when you're playing music. You can have a fast forward button or whatever, or a skip button. Also very nice. Face widgets are cool. You can do music, today's schedule. So let's see if I can bring them up. So sometimes I struggle a little bit to get to them. Supposedly you can scroll, but like right now it just doesn't feel like doing it. And maybe I'm doing it wrong. When you're using a security, I mean, it just kind of, I don't think that the touch input is very, I don't know what it sort of uses to monitor touch on this, but I'm not really able to get to the face with it right now, as you can see. So this is a real life review, right? I'm not able to get to them at all right now. So, there we go. Okay, so it's finally woken up. So it took a double tap to wake it up. So, I mean, they're kind of cool. If you want to just check your events or something like that, or you want to scroll through your music, that's cool. But I've always had a little bit of trouble getting to them. I don't know why. So I don't particularly use them all that much. But it's a cool thing to have. I mean, the more options, the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. So actually I'm going to go ahead and add next alarm, though I don't really have many. So let's see here. You can have your contact information show up on the always on display, which is nice. If you happen to lose your phone and somebody is nice enough to attempt to get it back to you. And then obviously notifications. This is for the lock screen, but it also goes into the always on display where you can say yes or no, I want them shown on the always on display. So I've got nothing to hide, so I just say view style, detailed, hide content, no, transparency. You can configure that. I just left that at the stock option. But of course, those settings are for this lock screen, right? Not the always on display. So, So let's go into biometrics here. This is a lot of the typical Android stuff. Not stuff that most people are going to use, but if you do ever want to sort of wipe out your settings here, you can do it in here. Let's see what's under biometric preferences. So preferred biometric, let's see, what is select your preferred, so this is, I guess, if you lock apps, you can select which preferred biometric method you would use. It seems to me you can use any of them at any time, so I don't really know what the point of that would be, but that's fine. I'm going to skip through this stuff because this is typical Android phone stuff. Most people have seen it a million times. There's an option to reduce animations on this, which I turn on because it saves a little bit of battery life, but more so it just makes everything snappier. I like a nice quick phone. I don't care about the animations. And usually I lower that setting in developer options as well. Motions and gestures. See, I love, there's just loads and loads of options on these things. And like I said, the more options, the better. One thing that I don't think that these Samsungs had at all before was Lift Awake. It's an option I generally turn off with a face recognition phone because you can just lift it up, and of course now it's not going to do it. But, well, okay, so again, this is a review. Sometimes this stuff it shows exactly how well it really works. And it kind of, the Lift Awake is probably less sensitive than it should be if you're a Lift Awake person. But I don't use Lift Awake because with a face recognition phone, you can end up unlocking the phone by accident just by sort of being anywhere within its range of the camera up in front. And then you've got an unlocked phone that you accidentally put back in your pocket unlocked, and then before you know it, you're calling your grandmother and you didn't want to. So I turn that off, but it is nice for those who maybe don't use an always on display or something along those lines. Smart Stay is awesome. As long as you're looking at the phone, the screen stays on. Anybody knows that if you've used a phone that turns off just about the second you try and go to tap something, that's a very nice, useful feature. Smart Alert. I guess if you put your phone face down, it'll vibrate immediately if you've got a notification, just sort of remind you. I haven't really noticed that at all. I think that's mostly because I just lay the phone down facing upward, and I always see a notification anyway. So easy mute. So yeah, you can put your palm rather, over the screen of the phone to mute an incoming call or something like that. It is nice if you're in a meeting or something. You know, I'm sure people have seen people fumble around with their phone trying to quiet it when it shouldn't be making noise. Direct call is not a feature I use just because it scares me, but supposedly if you've got a contact open and here, let's see if we can get this sucker to focus again here. And you put the phone up to your ear, it's going to call them. I don't use that, mostly because I don't make a whole lot of phone calls anyway. But it just worries me, the idea of the phone interpreting me wanting to call somebody when I don't. One-handed mode is pretty nice on this. All these big phones require one-handed mode. It's crazy to me that Google has not created a one-handed mode natively for Android yet, particularly when they're creating phones which are just as big as this. I'm a big dude. I'm 6'2". I cannot reach this corner without sort of risking dropping this phone. So Samsung's is pretty nice. The one on the Asus ROG phone is just a double tap of the home button. This requires 3 taps. And I think that you can so you can't even configure the size of it. Oh yeah, you can. Okay, nice. So, yeah, that's probably about where I would have it. So 3 taps, which is nice, or you can do a gesture. I find that the gestures sometimes don't really work all that well. What did it just do? Well, here's a perfect example of it not reading the gesture properly. Unless that's see, it just kind of, that's the gesture, and it's just kind of not working. So, or wait, what do you do? Maybe you do this. Yeah, see, the gestures just don't really work all that well. So I love a button tap. That's very nice. It's a triple tap, so it's a little more work, but it's fine. It's a great feature. It's not just fine. So let's see here. Game launcher, organize all your games in one place, and access extra features and enhance your gameplay experience. I don't play all that many games, so I haven't used that very much. Dual Messenger is a nice feature. If you have separate accounts for several apps, you can configure that in there. And video enhancer, supposedly this will enhance the quality of playing videos. I don't really use that. I don't play videos very much on my phone anyway, so it's neither here nor there for me, but they claim they have an ability to do that. So that's kind of all that I wanted to really get into on this. I didn't want to do a super in-depth review, but I just sort of wanted to do the changes to OneUI. General management, there's not a whole lot there. Accessibility, let's see what's under visibility enhancements, just because sometimes people use this stuff even though they don't particularly need them. There's nothing here I would really use. Font size and screen zoom, that's already elsewhere. So, I mean, really that was kind of it. I think OneUI is a bit prettier than it used to be. Everything's sort of grown up looking now and sort of appealing to the eye, where I thought that Samsung Experience and TouchWiz was just not a very good looking sort of interface. Battery life seems to be pretty good. I think I'll probably end up getting somewhere around 5 hours of screen time. I mean, I use some apps for my work that absolutely destroy the battery. So that's kind of what I expect generally out of any sort of US-based phone. I've got a Mate 20X that gets like 8 hours screen on time over 2 or 3 days, which is nuts. So I'm pretty babied as far as that goes. But I mean, this is fine. It's got wireless charge, so I can just lay it down. I've got a wireless charger in my office. So I almost never have anything less than like 80 or 90% battery anyway. It's just annoying when you go on, vacation or something like that, and let's say for whatever odd reason you don't have a charger nearby, or you use your phone a ton. I mean, by the end of the day with this phone, you might be out of battery life. If you start your day at 8 o'clock in the morning and you go until midnight or something like that, and you use it a decent amount, that's one issue still with the Samsung phones, I think. And it's not just Samsung. I mean, it's the Google phones. It's pretty much anything that's sold in a store in the United States. They just don't have the battery life control that some other brands do. But so far it's been fine. I mean, I haven't really thrashed it too hard. I mean, allegedly it's saying I've got 1 day and 9 hours left. But you can see, with a half hour's worth of screen on time, I'm down to 90% battery life. So that basically puts me at maybe having 5 hours worth of screen on time, which might be enough for some people. It's probably enough for me, but it might not be enough for, some people that use their phone a ton. So that's kind of that. I'm going to, just as a quick example, show you really the reason why, other than the OneUI update, that I got this phone. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and I will be right back. All right. So this is an HP Laptdock from the Elite X3 cell phone that they had released in 2017 or 2016, I forget. I did not buy this new. I bought this a couple weeks ago with the idea of using this with my Huawei Mate 20X, but it does not work. For some odd reason, the Mate 20X just won't display onto this thing. And there's a lot of reasons that could be happening. I'm not quite sure what they are, but long story short, I did a bit of Googling and I found that people were using this with the Note 9. Just the Note 9. No other Samsung phone seems to be working other than the Note 9, I think, anyway. I could be wrong about that, but I got this thing for 120 bucks on eBay. And so now I'm plugging this in to my phone, and you can see, if it decides to focus, there it is. I have Samsung DeX on this laptop, which, if you're sort of I always have a laptop anyway, but there's two very nice things about this. One, it's very small. Actually, there's, I guess, several nice things about this. One, the laptop itself is very small. It's only 12 inches, so it's super portable. Two, it's got a built-in battery, so my phone is charging right now. Three, I don't need to worry about Wi-Fi, obviously, because I've got my Verizon service going through the phone, etc., etc. And four, I've sort of got all my whole life on this phone already with these apps, so everything is already configured when I go to my laptop. So super, super cool. One thing, if you've done any research on this sort of setup here, let's see, maybe I'll just turn on my service here for a quick second. Airplane mode off. So one thing I will say, if you intend on doing this, and you don't need OneUI to do this, by the way. It was working fine with Android Oreo. But let's see here. I'm a big UFC guy, so of course that's immediately what comes up. But God willingly, audio does actually work while I'm trying to do this. Yeah, it's not going to today, but I did have audio working. And most times it does work, actually. I don't know why it's not right now. So, I mean, everybody knows this sort of setup is a little bit, it's not something that Samsung supports, but it has worked really, really well for me. In fact, the first time I plugged it in, it worked fine. So sometimes it takes an unplug and a plug and so on and so forth to get the audio working. Sometimes I'll plug it in and the res It's like a super low res, like it's sort of a safety mode or whatever. But it does work, and it works really good most times. So if you're thinking about getting a Note 9 now, after maybe you originally weren't all that big a fan, but the One UI changes and sort of the ability to use one of these guys intrigues you, I tell you honestly, it's a really, really good buy. Like I said, I don't know that I know of any phone out there right now that takes pictures this good, that has all these features. I mean, of course, like I said, there are phones out there that do have better cameras. I think the Pixel and the Mate 20 and the P20 have better cameras than this, but that's really about it. The camera is pretty good. It's totally it'll totally get you by, and it's just kind of all around now a great purchase. I mean, Best Buy selling these things for $850 with a wireless charging pad, so it's totally worth it for me. I mean, I don't get sponsored or paid to do these reviews. I went out and bought this thing myself, and I totally intend on keeping it. So. In fact, I think it's ousted my Razr Phone 2 as my daily driver. So that's it. That's all I've got to say about it. Hit me up in the comments if you have any questions or whatever. Thank you.